I think having land and not ruining it is the most beautiful art that anybody could ever want. Growing up in a small coastal town, there was nothing to do but be outside. My brother and I would jump on our bikes, round up all the kids in the neighborhood, and run wild for hours, whether it was climbing trees or making forts at the nature reserve, or going to the beach year-round to swim in the freezing Southern Ocean. We were always outside. I can remember one birthday when all I wanted was an iPod, the one with the touch screen, the one that all of my friends had. So, on the morning of my birthday, you can imagine my disappointment when I ravaged through the wrapping paper, only to find a Walkman MP3 player. The details of it are burned into my mind. It was a maroon color, and it only had one song, Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana. And, like an arranged marriage, we learned to love one another. Thank God I didn't get that iPod, because whilst I was climbing trees, rocking out to Nirvana, my friends were behind closed doors, indulging in the digital world, favoring the colors of an LCD screen and not the colors of the natural world. I've always hated being cooped up, so normal school didn't really suit with the whole air-conditioned concrete box thing. I used to fake being sick just so I could stay home, and one day I went to work with Dad. The job site was paradise. The tradesmen were blasting Nirvana, there were heaps of dogs to pat, and kitted out for all drives. Because it was such a hot day, the owner of the house they were working on had stocked a fridge full of icy poles, popsicles. 10-year-old me thought construction was heaven, and I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps. On my uncle's farm, there is a creek. Surrounded by harsh Australian landscape, the creek is an oasis, a paradise amongst barren land. We camped there for a few weeks, and with no internet service, power, or running water, we panned for gold, went on hikes, and swam in the creek, which I loved. However, we were a bit sick of camping, so Dad and I decided to build a house, as you do. And with no clue about construction, I had no idea what I was in for. Well, it didn't go exactly like that. You see, together, we built a model eco-house for my Quest project 4 years ago. And since then, there was some back and forth about continuing the project. And together, we came to the consensus that construction is in dire need of improvement, and decided to try our hand at a more holistic construction approach. It started with a shipping container, which seemed like a good foundation to build from and a fast way to get the project underway. Later, we learned that the walls on a shipping container are far from straight due to years of abuse carrying goods across the seas. We leveled the container and cut openings for windows and doors. We then began bracing the container with steel we found at a local scrapyard. Working with steel means a whole lot of welding, so I hit the ground running and began welding window and door frames and large steel beams to brace the container. We were in need of some timber and ended up finding an abundance of hardwood on a neighboring farm, which the farmer agreed to give away on the terms that he got a few good lengths of timber. We then spent the entire day loading this timber in the long dry grass in the middle of a paddock. Every piece lifted from the stack would reveal a new creature. I'm talking redback spiders, brown snakes, rats, and mice. Much of it was past saving and ended up as firewood to get us through those particularly cold winter mornings. We sorted, denailed, and milled the timber for days before it could even be put to use. So when the stud wall was finished and we pitched the roof, you can only imagine how stoked we were on finally having something to show for all of that work. We lined the ceiling with old cedar boards and installed secondhand windows. We then used old insulation and plywood to seal the roof. We came across this, the remains of a demo job in the city. So we loaded the ute to the gunnels and used all of the timber to frame up both ends of the house. With no experience doing physical work, there were a lot of times like these. We planted thousands of trees at the farm. We also cut them down. Dad refused to pay for a Christmas tree, so a few days before Christmas, Operation Free the Tree was born. It involved a reciprocating saw and cuts from a barbed wire fence. Maybe a story for another time. In the 40-degree summer heat, we insulated with repurposed coolroom panels and began to clad, using all vintage corrugated iron on the walls and the roof, and then some weatherboards on one end, just for a bit of variation. It was then time to prep the site. So we spent a few days cutting the grass and clearing fallen trees. The site was no longer as overgrown. So we installed a concrete-less footing system, which put my welding skills to the test. We then installed a second-hand solar system and a 10,000-litre water tank that we lifted by hand over my uncle's front yard fence and onto a trailer. Finally, it was time to move the house to the creek. So when the crane came to pick it up, the house weighed a total of 8.2 tons. It weighed so much, in fact, that when the crane was at a 3-degree incline, it was at risk of tipping over. So the crane man had to come back the following week with an even bigger crane. After months of blood, sweat, and tears, the house reached its destination, and we decided to build a deck just to top it off. So we got some second-hand decking off some friends and did just that. And this is the result. When I did get back to school, I felt as though I needed a holiday for my holiday. But no one around could really grasp the amount of work we did, because the work wasn't visible to anyone else. It was just me and my dad chipping away at this huge project in the middle of the school holidays. I've learned to appreciate the journey of my project as opposed to the finished product. I've experienced the satisfaction of a hard day's work in construction and the satisfaction of learning my father's craft. When it was time to start writing our scripts, I found it really difficult to find one key idea to talk about. Sure, the climate crisis, the tiny house movement, the debt cycle, the housing crisis, off-grid living, minimalism, and permaculture are all exceptional topics I could have talked about. Metalwork, fabrication, and carpentry are the obvious takeaways from this journey. But I've come to the conclusion that maybe carpentry isn't for me. But learning it has given me a deeper connection with my dad. Seriously, guys, so much to talk about. I think I should write a book or something. Sitting on stilts, the house has very minimal impact on its surrounding environment, which goes back to the opening statement. We built a house that doesn't affect the land it stands upon, but rather complements it. The house was intended for family and friends, but I'm sure you could stay as well if you get on my good side. What you see is a result of materials that would otherwise be thrown away, making lemonade from lemons, if you will, taking essentially scrap material and making it usable again. Now we all get it. This project was seriously hard work, but it couldn't have been possible without everyone who helped out and chipped in. The friends and family who donated materials, offering time and expertise, helped push us over the line. In a world where we destroy untouched land in place for air-conditioned concrete boxes, trading the serenity of a forest for the hustle and bustle of urban jungles, we've lost touch with the very earth beneath our feet. I want to live in a world where progress is not measured by the height of our skyscrapers, but by the richness of our soil. That little house by the creek is a step in the right direction. I invite you to take that step toward living without an impact. You could go as far as going fully off the grid, living off of kangaroo meat and sunflower seeds like me, or you could buy a biodigester or two from Freddie. I think having land and not ruining it is the most beautiful art that anybody could ever want. Thank you.